NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences. Demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. This has just been a really bizarre day here in the studio. The gremlins. I think I had some announcements. DerbyCon's holding its first ever mental health and wellness workshop. To support their efforts, please go to derbycon.com/wellness.
That is fantastic, by the way. I could not agree more with that concept. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I was talking about this on another show, and I haven't done it yet, but I have a list of books, and I call them my best business books. But a lot of the business books, I think, not only help you in your career, but also help you kind of in life in general, is what I found. So I liked the last lecture for that. Who Moved My Cheese was really good. In fact, one of our consultants, based on my recommendation, just read it and was like, yeah, that actually really helps me in, his consulting practice and such. The other one with that Ben, shout out to Ben Johnson from Obsidian. He's one of the founders over there. I saw him post about this book called Extreme Ownership, like the Navy SEALs guide, and it's written by 2 Navy SEAL. Now, there's a lot of books written by former, Navy SEAL or people who served as Navy SEALs. This one's really good. It's called Extreme Ownership. I'm about halfway through that, and that already has made my list. So when we talk about wellness, those books have helped me, not just in business, but also, kind of deal with things in life as well. So good stuff.
There's quite an old book called The Four Agreements, some Toltec wisdom. It's a very simple book. It's not a long read, but for those that are struggling with some internal guidance, I think it's a very, very good read. So just want to throw that one in the pile.
Yeah, I think books are a good way to help support your mental health.
Absolutely.
And I listen to all my books in audio. I don't have time to read, but when I'm in the car, I like to listen to books. So.
Agreed.
But you should always listen to Security Weekly and then listen to books, is my recommendation. I just realized we're cutting into our own listening time. Anyway, Russian hackers can use malware that can survive OS reinstalls. Essentially, they've figured out ways to, I don't know if it's replace or Trojan the UEFI firmware, which we talked about. We had some folks on that do this for a living and create UEFI firmware. And there are protections, but, as we learned, not all of the manufacturers will implement those protections. It's kind of left up to kind of like an RFC, right? It's left to the implementer to figure out what protections they put in place. And I feel like that's what led to this happening. Did you guys see the story?
I did. I saw the story, and it's certainly a great deal of concern. We all know that things tend to migrate up the stack a little bit, and it's not a surprise that UEFI, as it's gotten more advanced, has gotten some opportunities there. And as you said, we had some folks on talking about it. But if I think we have to pick responsible vendors. If the vendors are not implementing the controls as the systems are rolling out, then don't buy from those guys.
Yeah, they dubbed the rootkit LoJax, and it was ESET researchers that also found some other malware. I need to follow these folks a little more closely. They had 2 that were splashed in the news that they found. And this, there's two links in the show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com. The Hacker News article has a much more detailed description with a really complex flowchart that I haven't gone through in any great detail as to how they pulled off this attack. This looks really nerdy and geeky and something that I want to spend more time with. So,
absolutely. Hey, Paul, did anything in that article? I was just perusing it briefly. Talk about ability to recover. I mean, what comes to mind, obviously, intuitively, is reflash the BIOS. But was there any concerns there mentioned? I didn't see it.
Yeah, I'd imagine if it works like any other firmware, you can just replace everything. It like basically the same way the attackers are replacing it, which would, I'd imagine, remove their foothold. Like you have to gain an initial foothold on the system to then be able to overwrite the UEFI firmware. But I'm assuming if you do that, you also then obviously have to stop the way they initially got in, so they can't get in again and then modify. So it's almost like a two-step. Sure. Process. Jason?
Yeah, I was actually thinking just down the same path that Joff was how to recover from it. The only thing I came up with was flashing that. I was looking through it. I don't see anything on it, but it'd be pretty nasty. Everybody's talked for years about get a system compromised, just reinstall and move on. Well, if you got hit with this, that's obviously not enough. You'd have to check your BIOS or the firmware and make sure that hadn't been modified too.
Yep. And you're right, Jason. We've kind of theorized about this attack. And I think, now might be the time where we start seeing it. I think many of these attacks that we see start out as academic, right? And we might not see some of the initial attacks because they're used by groups that are very stealthy. And if they've managed to pull off like this theoretical style attack or something that's really new, they're trying to keep it low and under the radar. Then once we start talking about it on the show, because we've observed it like we have in the wild, like cats out of the bag. And then usually what lags behind is like the defense to really ingrain that defense inside the organizations then takes time after that. Because everyone now is like, yeah, we've known this could be a problem, but we're not really concerned about it because we haven't seen people get hit by it. And that, I think, in many organizations could be the wrong approach. I think a lot of, government organizations certainly, or those that are targets, are aware of some of these attacks and may put the defenses in before, these attacks become more wider and mainstream. So that's typically the history behind that, that I've observed anyway.
I did find in here where they said, that the only way to deal with this is to reflash the memory on it, put in clean firmware, which is a very delicate process that must be performed manually and carefully, to quote the article. Alternatively, you can replace the motherboard. So,
right? Yeah, because that's easy, right?
That's what I thought.
Because you're not really in most consumer hardware, right? You're not replacing the motherboard. You're just buying a new system. Like it's cheaper to go buy a new $300 system than it is to go find the right motherboard and swap all the components out and put it back together. Which, of course, when you do that, happens perfectly every time, and there's never like a short or memory that's not seated correctly.
You never drop your hard drive into the motherboard on accident.
Oh, sounds like you're speaking from experience, Jason.
No. Never would I do something like that.
Or dropped your screwdriver into the motherboard by accident.
Yeah.
Put a hole through it. Yeah.
This one's really creepy. Facebook's two-factor authentication with a phone number is not just used for two-factor authentication. So it sounded like to me like if you have purposely not given Facebook your phone number because you don't want it to have that level of information on your profile, but you've enabled SMS two-factor authentication and provided your phone number as a method of authentication, that Facebook is now using that phone number for other purposes to, I think, look at your location and maybe recommend friends and using it for other advertisement type purposes. So they said the researchers found that when a user gives Facebook a phone number for two-factor in order to receive alerts, that phone number became targetable by advertisers within a couple of weeks. I'm wondering why that could also be many of us experiencing a certain rise in spam on your phone.
Spam call.
Yeah, spam calls on your phone.
Yeah, I think it's a given, and that everybody should just accept this fact that any piece of data that is given to Facebook is going to be used for whatever purpose they want to use it for.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of it. And you know, if you buy into that contract, because that's really what it is, then you know, user beware. If you don't, you know, many security professionals I've talked to have formerly been Facebook users, have actually abandoned the platform entirely because of the amount of profiling that's going on, the amount of wholesale reuse of data. You know, it's a real concern. And then, of course, there are many security professionals in the industry that absolutely refuse to use the platform at all.
Jason, did you have comments?
I was actually just looking some stuff up here, but if I recall, I mean, they actually made a comment in this article that Facebook didn't really deny this. They basically started talking about saying, well, yeah, but people can control their ad, you know, preferences or how they handle some of this stuff, and pointed you to your settings. So kind of waved their hand a little bit and said, look over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's kind of interesting. I always see the Facebook settings as kind of feel-good things, and that's about it.
Yeah.
You know, but anybody's in the security industry, when we're naturally paranoid, most of us probably shouldn't be using the platform at all. We may be using it for other reasons, you know, family reasons, whatever.
Yeah, and like, you know, I've said too, well, a couple of things. One, in order to have a Facebook page for your business, like, you have to have an account, so you're almost forced to have an account if you want to use that for business purposes, which I don't like. Facebook, also my second point, Facebook has been under a lot of scrutiny lately for a lot of reasons. In fact, you just saw the Instagram founders left. Personally, I know of people that have jumped shipped on Facebook as well. We've seen a history of that. Who's the CISO at Facebook that was at Yahoo? What's his name? It's escaping me.
Alex Stamos.
Alex Stamos, right? We saw that as well. So like, it's really just like bad news after bad news for Facebook, which is really bad. Now, I want to come back to the phone number thing, because if you shop in an actual retail store, I'm not sure if you guys do, right? But when you do, like, a lot of times they ask you for your phone number. I'm like, why do you need my phone number to conduct a retail transaction, right? And then, like, what are you supposed to do? Ask the person behind the register, so, hey, what are you going to do with my information? Who's it going to be shared with when I give you my phone number? Like, the person behind the register isn't. Even if what they tell you, like, how do they know they're telling the truth? And I think what I'm coming down to, because I used to try harder to protect my phone number, but I just kind of, like, gave up on that because it just ended up in so many places. So then, like, what do? I mean, you can get a new phone number, but what about all the people for business reasons, for example, that have your old phone number? I think that's why, like, my next phone purchase, I really have to have double SIM cards in there, and I got to keep my old phone number, but then, like, specifically have another number that I give out for, like, business purposes, right? And to specific friends and family that I never give out. I never put it on a form on the internet. I never give it to a retailer. I don't use that number when I go buy a car or any of those other things that are really the triggers for many of these spam calls. That's, I think, my strategy moving forward. I don't know. We'll see how. And it comes back to Michael Bazell's interview that we had, right, about how you protect that information. And he has a lot of people have maintained multiple phone numbers. I've just done a bad job at that.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Paul, because I just moved to a new mobile platform that supports 2 SIMs.
Yeah. Now who's your provider, Jeff? Because I'd like to have it from different providers, but when you start looking at the options out there for phones that can actually support multiple U.S. carriers, the options are slim. Like, the OnePlus has a dual SIM option, but like, you can get one from AT&T, but you can't put a Verizon in the other one. Like, there's limitations there, right?
Yeah, there are. You know, now my motivations were different. I do have a OnePlus 6, and I think it's a very good phone platform. You know, I've had it for all of a couple of days now, but I'm very impressed with it. My motivations were largely because all the European
I was
travel.
going to say you're going to Europe, so you need a different SIM card. Yep.
Yeah, and I wanted to drop in. I was in London last week, and I wanted to drop in a Vodafone SIM or an EE SIM.
Yep.
In the UK, and I'll be in Stockholm later. But fortunately, I can do that now, and EU roaming, Brexit notwithstanding, but EU roaming does work right now, and so that's going to be a huge advantage for me. But I don't see any reason why you cannot use that with dual US carriers. I think it's just going to be an issue of the
compatibility with the SIM.
Yeah, it's going to be frequency support, CDMA versus GSM. I do use T-Mobile in the US, which tends to be more compatible with other world providers because of the GSM frequency set and signaling. So that's kind of my solution for the international problem.
And you got to be forthcoming with your wife as to why you either have two phones or multiple SIMs and numbers, right? You feel like, hey, everything's on the up and up here, right? Because that's like a red flag if you got like multiple numbers in multiple phones or SIMs.
All I can say on domestic politics is no comment.
Yeah.
You could also get one of these phone number online, right, where you can forward things to your phone.
You can sell it.
It's like a Google Voice number or something like that.
Yeah, yep. You can do the Google Voice thing. I don't know. I've had mixed success with that.
Well, and you can get there are voice over IP services that you can buy out there as well, but they can be challenging. You'll find, as I've found, and I've tried to use this for red teaming operations, you will find that many software services will not support a voice over IP number. They refuse to accept that as an option for a second factor authentication, that kind of stuff. So that's a challenge. What we find, taking it to the pen testing space for a moment, what we find ourselves doing quite a lot is going out and getting a burner phone of some sort with a declining balance, some sort of flip phone or something like that, just for some red team operations. So, yeah, it's a significant challenge, but I think the only solution, to my mind, is to use some sort of filtering service in front of your actual mobile number and to never give your mobile number out. But if the cat's already out of the bag, then you've got to start again. And I think that's the problem Paul is struggling with.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, because you got to keep your old number, right?
Right. Yeah. And people, they get it in their contacts list, and then it's a pain in the ass to inform everybody and blah, 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 right?
I think it's moving in the right direction, though, of getting a new number and then only giving that to trusted people. I think that's important. I think that's a strategy I want to employ. So I'm actually hoping the next Google iteration of a phone has support for multiple SIMs. Isn't the new Apple iPhone? Does the new Apple iPhone have multiple SIMs, or is that? Were they just talking about that? I don't know.
Sticking to the Google thing just for a minute. Google is looking towards eSIMs, and eSIMs are to push you towards their provider space. And there's a lot of traffic online saying, "Hey, why isn't the Pixel supporting multiple SIMs?" And typically the answer is no. We're going to eSIM, and we're not going to look at that. And Google, I don't know if Google has an official statement, but I've certainly read statements from other people that are looking hard at this, that are saying that Google sees dual SIMs as more of a developing market thing, as in, not mature market like the US is. So I think that's a bit disappointing and a bit short-sighted, but I don't know if that's Google's official statement. I think that's just sort of third parties reflecting on it. But it's really a bit painful, which is why I went with the OnePlus 6.
Yeah, it's a solid choice. I almost went there too, Joff. We'll see what happens with the next Pixel, whatever Google's next phone is, if it's still in the Pixel line. And maybe there's a OnePlus 7. Is that? Well, I don't know what the release time is on those, but
I don't know what their release cycle is as well. I've been in a couple of days here. I've got it here in my hand. I've been very happy.
Yeah, do you like it? I almost bought one. They're really cool phones.
Great phones. It does. The migration process was again. I sound like a commercial here, but the migration process from the Android was pretty simple.
So you went from a Pixel to the OnePlus 6, and you got the same.
Yeah, from the Pixel.
Yeah, the Android swap over is really easy. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty simple. They've even got an app that will port all the apps over, and you've got to do some things like get your 2FA and stuff like that up and running.
Yeah.
But it was not too bad.
Nice. Alrighty, enough phone talk. I do have a funny story. Don't let me forget about it at the end. What is up with people having RDP exposed to the internet still to this day? How does this seems like basic, I hate to use the stupid phrase of blocking and tackling, but really? RDP on the internet? I know these are being discovered, basically password sprayed and then being sold, in the evil underground on the internet. But the Rapid 7, of course, we talked about some of this, right? When we had Rapid 7, Todd Beardsley, 9 million devices with port 3389 enabled on the internet in early 2016. And that number rose to over 11 million by mid to late 2017. People are just putting more RDP on the internet? I don't understand. Why is this?
Well, that's my kind of reaction. My gut reaction is if you're living in a world where you should be aware of security implications of this, why are you putting open RDP on the internet? It seems it just seems baffling to me. I mean, it's a horrendous mistake. You shouldn't be doing it. And I suppose people have their reasons, but hello, there's VPN solutions out there. I mean, use them. Yeah, it's baffling to me. And anyway, and unpatched, it can be, tremendously problematic. And even patched, it can be, password spraying can be performed against these things pretty easily, right? Single factor, go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is it that there's a lot of organizations that don't know about remote access and VPN solutions that wouldn't require you putting RDP on the internet? Is there a bar here? I mean, I feel like there is, right? Obviously, if there's 11 million exposed to the internet in 2017.
Oh, like the world's a pyramid, right? The very, very large organizations that can afford security operations, that can afford threat hunting teams, that kind of stuff. That's actually the minority, right? If you look at it, there's a ton of very, very small organizations out there that are trying to wrestle with doing the best they can. And a lot of them are getting cloud enabled, but just because you're getting cloud enabled and dealing with Azure or dealing with AWS or whatever your cloud provider of choice is, doesn't mean you're doing it well, right? And even despite all the guidance. So I feel for them. I think it's a big challenge. And then there's the old operational convenience argument, which is often put forward. Why should I VPN when I can just RDP directly to it? There's really, I don't think, any excuse for that today. You should be using at least a certificate-based VPN or a VPN with password 2FA and doing it that way. It's not that hard to deploy anymore.
Well, and I think that's some of the issue there, right? Is security teams are like, yeah, we have this VPN, you should be never exposing this to the internet. But then rogue IT enters, or maybe it's not even IT, right? Maybe it's a research department.
Shadow IT.
Yeah, shadow IT. Everyone in the organization is like, oh, yeah, I have exposed 3389 to the internet. Now you should probably do something to try and stop that, right? I think on the kind of almost flip side of that coin is, what are organizations doing in their IT operations and security? And I almost think this should be an IT operations thing to fingerprint their external exposed services on a regular basis and putting that in the remediation plans. I feel like there's a lot of open source tools to do that and a lot of vendors that can do that for you with a lot of extra enhanced features on top of that. And I feel like this should be like a commodity. This should just be like table stakes, that if you have an internet connection, part of your process should be to have someone on the outside looking in and taking action on things that shouldn't be there according to your policies and your overall, risk and security program. And I feel like that's not getting done in so many organizations. And if it is, it's not frequent enough. This should be like an everyday thing. Like, there should be an alert generated if 3389 is open to the internet, if that's something you don't want, which you shouldn't want that, right?
I think some of this speaks to the success of the cloud providers, and they're enabling shadow IT for better or worse, and by enabling that, people are taking advantage of it because they can get quick resolution to an information processing problem, and those kind of folks, they're just not thinking about security. It's just not in their equation. So it just is the state of the world.
Yep. Jason, you have some stories in there. Oh, Jason, sorry, you're muted.
I'm on mute.
Jason, you're muted.
I was like reading your stories. I'm like, why isn't Jason talking? Did he not hear? Oh, he's muted.
I had to sneeze and I put it on mute
No
and then I forgot. So the one that I thought was interesting was the Secret Service warns of surge in ATM wiretapping attacks. This was a Brian Krebs article from actually last week. But the pictures in it are kind of interesting to me. We've talked a lot about card skimmers and stuff like that and looking for something being overlaid on the ATM, right? Reach out, mess with the card skimmer area, see if something is there that shouldn't be. And the images in here are showing the attackers actually drilling a hole into the ATM and mounting their stuff on the inside and then waiting to see if anybody responds to that. And if not, then they come back and load up the last little bit of their kit, which is the cameras and stuff like that to watch you type your PIN. And then they put everything back in place, and you're none the wiser unless you're looking behind, trying to pull everything off to see if there's a hole drill behind it, through it. So that was really kind of wild. I mean, and we're not talking about a small hole here. This thing looks like it's about 2 inches in diameter. But apparently this is the new wave of ATM skimming going on.
Apparently attackers won't give up on ATM skimming. I guess it's like the low-hanging fruit, right? Like, people are going there to get money, so they'll continue to go back to that, right? I mean, that's yeah,
they got a lot of cash in them typically,
right?
So.
I love it when you see the attacks where somebody just backs up a truck and throws the whole fucking thing in the back of the truck.
Yeah, there was that episode, that horrible episode of Breaking Bad that scarred me for life, where there's an ATM involved, and those that watch Breaking Bad are having heinous flashbacks to that horrible episode. So, not that it was a bad, but it scars you for life, basically. Patrick Bortles at it again with hacking, disclosing. This bug is interesting. It's kind of like almost information gathering, like unauthorized information gathering was the best. His demo basically has an unauthorized, process downloading the contact database. This was a 0-day vulnerability in the new macOS Mojave that Patrick disclosed.
Interesting.
At it again. I don't know. I don't have anything else on that story. New Linux kernel bug. This is a privilege escalation bug in Red Hat sent to us in Debian. The Qualys team is the one that disclosed this. They dubbed it the mutagen astronomy vulnerability, and it's being tracked to CVE 2018-14634. Local privilege escalation in the kernel's create elf tables function. That operates memory tables. I'm reminded of some folks in the security community that told me, people think Linux is really secure, but the privilege escalation that's possible in Linux is just astonishing. And ever since that person told me that, whenever I see a privilege escalation, I'm like, yep, they were right. And I just continue to see them all the time as we do these shows and track vulnerabilities. I'm like, oh, there's another privilege escalation that my friend probably knew about before, or had come across or whatever, and was just like, it's just riddled with that, which is pretty concerning.
Local privilege escalation is very common, but listeners should be aware that you need a shell access to a system as a regular user before you can attempt to exploit such a thing.
Sure.
Now there are many possible ways that you can get that potentially. It might even be through a web server or something like that, but local privilege escalation, there's bugs there. Of course there are. It's something that's been around for a long time, but like anything, there's complexity, and there's the ability to do weird and interesting things. Which this one's definitely weird. I saw that it only works on 64-bit systems, not 32-bit, which is kind of an unusual twist. You normally see that the other way around.
True.
But the comment there was the issue does not affect 32-bit systems as they don't have a large enough address space to exploit the bug. and systems with less than 32 gig of memory are unlikely to be affected due to the excessive memory demands during exploitation. That's kind of an interesting comment. So
make monitoring a little easier. All of a sudden, your memory goes flying through the roof.
yeah, I was gonna say like the
What's
dead
that?
flag, the dead obvious red flag is system suddenly consumes 60 gig of RAM. It's like yeah, I think we got a problem.
Right. Now, what I also found was interesting, Joff, specifically, I think you probably have read about this one, right? Like, did you ever think we'd be talking about fragmentation reassembly attacks again? And apparently,
No, absolutely not.
apparently we're back talking about fragmentation reassembly. This was like I remember taking early SANS courses in like 2000,
Oh, shit, early
2000.
Yeah.
Like 2000, 99, 2000, right? And sitting in class, and first like day, like you learned how TCP/IP works, right? And you're like, oh, it's really fascinating. Then you get to the attacks. Fragmentation reassembly is like, I was like really cool, like, 18, 19 years ago, right? I was like, wow. And largely, like, that problem was like everyone fixed their TCP/IP stacks, although we thought. And now here we've got fragment smack, which, again, it looks like, Joff, it's really just another variation of a fragmentation reassembly attack.
It does. It's kind of interesting. It reminded me of my network days a little bit in that I always knew that, if you wanted to take out a Cisco device, especially a device that was capable of forwarding datagrams and routing, if you dropped a packet on it that was that had a TTL of 1 when it reached the interface, the thing always got processed on the main CPU, and you could do really interesting things. If the TTL was greater than 1, then that packet would always be processed in the ASIC hardware, and it wasn't quite as interesting. And so it sort of reminds me of that a little bit in that, we have a software-based kind of attack. It's obviously going to the main CPU of the devices, sending fragmentation, and I bet you it's a little bit of a variation on that idea.
Yeah, and so now that you say that, Joff, like there's variations on the fragment attack, and again, I'm going back like almost 20 years now, but there were different versions of fragmentation attacks. You could do the ones where like the fragments would just never end, right? And it would keep going. But then there was ones that was like you could overlap the fragments, and so the
overlap, missing fragments.
And missing fragments, yeah. So there was multiple variations of that. And like I feel like I thought we had that all figured out. Like everyone's TCP/IP stacks were like, oh yeah, we know these attacks and we fixed them, but clearly not.
Yeah. No, I think it's a similar thing. That they're driving up CPU usage as denial of service by making it be processed on the main CPU for reassembly, and and that's bad, right?
And
That's
the article says that Cisco has 88 products that are affected by the Linux kernel fragment smack bug.
Right. And the other interesting thing is too, it doesn't surprise me that they mentioned the Nexus platform in here, and iOS XE. So Cisco did make a move, and I was going to say in more recent years, but certainly around about, I'm going to say 2009-10 period, where they started leveraging the Linux kernel a lot more heavily in these platforms such as Nexus and iOS XE and so forth, and they started doing a lot more segmentation and virtualization in these platforms. So I'm thinking that they ironed out a lot of the bugs in the original iOS, but they hadn't paid as much attention to these more Linux-based platforms, and I think that's where this is coming from.
Yep. The 68-year-old former NSA employee who worked in NSA's Tailored Access Operations, or TAO division, was sentenced. It says today. When was this article published? September 25th. Was sentenced to 66 months in prison for bringing those hacking tools home, and they were likely part of the code dumped, known as the shadow brokers, of course.
Wow, 5-year sentence, huh?
Yep. I don't know if there's anything else really interesting about that story, but yeah.
It just is what it is.
It is what it is. Like we all speculated, like when those tools were leaked, like someone leaked them, right?
Now someone's going to get hell for this.
Someone got hell for it, and that's really all there is to know about that. Automakers are tackling connected vehicle vulnerability management. Was not quite what I was expecting from an article. It's kind of all over the place. and very sensational. Did you get that too, Jason, when you were did you read this article?
Well, I was reading it. I got interested in the title because it says how they're tackling these issues, and you're like, okay, cool, let me check it out. And all it did was talk about all the problems they've had and where they had problems at. And you're like, so how are they tackling it? And the answer is nobody knows. It's not in this article. So, I mean, I was hopeful for a second there. I was like, hey, this could be a cool read. And then it was interesting, I guess, seeing where some of the flaws were, but there was nothing about how they're fixing things, I guess, other than the fact that they're tracking numbers on it. I don't know.
Yeah. And Twitter, this one, admittedly, I did not read. Twitter, and I saw a couple of articles posted this week about Twitter warns that direct messages were exposed, and I didn't read the details. However, anytime I send a direct message, a couple of things go through my mind, right? It's on the internet, and I think they did talk about building some kind of encryption into direct messages, although I don't know if that's been implemented. In any case, when I send a direct message, two things go through my mind. One, it's on the internet, and I fully expect that somehow someone will be able to read that somewhere, right? That it's direct. It doesn't say private message. It says, or encrypted message. It says direct message. The second thing is I always keep in mind that I could fat finger my direct message and then send it out to all my Twitter followers instead of that one individual. So I'm very careful when I type in a direct messages, and I try and very quickly take that off. If it's I want it to be more private and secret, I'll move it to Signal, right? We all, can say what you will about Signal. I think it's a pretty solid messaging platform, not without its implementation issues that, well, on Android, it's really an Android problem, not a Signal problem. And nothing is completely 100% private or secure, at least you shouldn't believe that. But messages that I do care about that I want to be private, Signal is where I would go for that.
One thing that I thought was...
Go ahead.
One thing I thought was interesting about this is that it wasn't all direct messages. It was messages between users and a company.
Oh,
I have no idea how they made that differentiation.
Well, yeah, because you can verify a Twitter account as a person or a company, right?
Yeah, and somehow this issue affected it when it was not between like you and me, but me and Delta Airlines or Wells Fargo or something like that, which I thought was kind of weird. Weird condition.
Weird. Okay, so now we're on to our silly story of the week, which I think this really relates to security. Did you guys get where I was going with this in security, right? So basically the headline was, teens unwittingly steal oregano after smashing van into a pot dispensary. And I'm like, hold on, like what the hell is going on here? But it turns out that in this particular dispensary, this was in Colorado, that they had a display in the window of all of the, like different marijuana things and pre-rolls and all that stuff is what they were saying in the article. And the dispensary was like, yeah, in the window, we didn't use actual marijuana. We used oregano. Like all our actual marijuana is locked up and protected because it's a controlled, even though it's legal, it's still a controlled substance, right? And everything that's in the display, they're like, we used oregano. And these teens drove their van and smashed through the front of the dispensary, grabbed all of what they thought was pot but was really oregano, and got caught.
And then, that weekend, they cooked the most wonderful Italian food.
Right? They made the best gravy ever.
One of the things I thought was interesting about this, and got to be disheartening, they stole the van that they crashed into it to go do this. Left the van in the store, the dispensary, grabbed everything, took off running. Apparently, a liquor store got robbed just up the way, which they think was a distraction, essentially, to get the cops to go look at the liquor store instead of where they were smashing the dispensary.
Good Lord.
And they still walked out with oregano. So
man, they wanted that oregano badly. They really wanted it.
I mean, it's kind of like a honey pot, I guess, right? Like you get...
I guess so.
Honey pot, get it?
Honey pot, yeah. But I mean, think about that. So now it's a federal offense to steal a car. Is that true? Is it grand larceny? Is that grand?
That'll stay state.
Grand Theft Auto? Is that the video game?
I was thinking the video game.
Yeah, like it's bad. And stealing a car is like bad. Like that gets you in a lot of trouble. And then of course they've got to deal with the fact that they smashed it through the store, causing thousands of dollars worth of damage. Anytime you cause damage, as in with a computer crime, right, you're in more trouble. Then it's like theft, which in this case they stole oregano. I mean, so these people are in a whole lot of trouble for just being like the dumbest criminals this week. Anyhow,
well, just
Don't
like
forget knocking off the liquor
it's-
store.
and then yeah, if they robbed a liquor store, they're in trouble. I mean, so these individuals are gonna. I mean, I don't know if they're be tried as adults or not, but I mean, they're in a lot of trouble for something that like is completely stupid. Like, why would you do that? I don't understand what goes through some of these
I was going
criminals'
to say,
minds.
if you're going to get into trouble, then do it upright. Really get into trouble.
Guess so.
But yeah, that's it's just I guess just lucky for the society that most criminals are stupid.
And
So-
I guess the honeypot was I mean, I don't know if maybe they shouldn't display it on the front. I mean, they attracted attention, right? I mean, it really was like a honeypot, right? Like you want the low-hanging fruit, and you want people to go after low-hanging fruit, but you don't necessarily want them to crash the entire network or crash through the front of your store to get the stuff that's not real, right? So I think there's a real lesson in here in security.
Well, but wait, it's Colorado too. I mean, I'm sure pot's not that expensive. Could they have pooled their funds and gone shopping instead?
And another great point, Joff. Like, it's recreational legal in the state of Colorado. I mean, they were teens, so maybe they weren't of age to go into the store and buy it. So they were.
Now that's a point.
Their grand plan was to smash the van and steal what was in the window, which was just a terrible. Now, security-wise too, they might want to put the concrete posts in the front of the store so that people can't drive their vehicles through it. As you know, I mean, a lot of dispensaries are very much targets, and not so much for marijuana, but because it's
Cash.
still federally
It's for
illegal,
cash.
it has to be all cash, right? Because many of them can't use banks. Most of them can't use banks, and so yeah, the theft is a thing. And I would think the security would be higher in some of the dispensaries, but obviously not in this case. I think
The pictures are awesome, though.
yeah, there's a lot of stories. Like if you Google for teen steal oregano, like you can see all the different takes on the story and get all kinds of different pictures and video, which is just it's entertaining.
That's really kind of fantastic. I think I should take us out, Paul. What do you think?
I think, Joff, you should take us out.
All right. So thank you for watching Security Weekly, everybody. Over and out.